Hello once again to the Dragon Plus live stream. I am your host, as always, Bart Carroll. I am flying solo this week. Jeremy Crawford will be here next week as he is coming on every other week. But I look forward to spending the next hour with everyone viewing today. And joining me is our special guest, Bob Nelson, the ringleader, the guild master of the Adventuring Guild. So welcome, Bob.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
So for folks tuning in, we're going to be talking to Bob about the Adventuring Guild and all of the podcasts that their podcast network is putting on. We also want to talk a little bit about Extra Life, which is sort of how we first became acquainted with Bob and sort of the impetus for the discussion today. TK has joined the fray. I see her in chat at the moment. She has come. They have come out of their previous live stream for Jace Beleren Must Die, and TK can tell me if Jace has died, but I don't believe so. But welcome. TK joins the fray in chat as well. They are running 2 raffles at throughout the hour. The first one will be one of our maps and miscellany packs. So again, yeah. Oh, Jace hasn't died yet. Again, as a small thanks for tuning in, taking an hour of your afternoons for our viewers. We wanted to make sure that we were doing at least some regular giveaways. So thank you very much. So let's get to it. Bob Nelson, so you are calling in from Minden, Nebraska, which we were just talking about before we went live to the world.
Yeah, the small town of Minden.
Which and you were saying you're still unbearing yourself from the sub-zero Arctic weather that's been afflicting everyone these days.
Yeah, pretty much. It just won't stop snowing here. About every couple days, it snows a little bit more.
That was my experience. I was mentioning I drove once as close as I probably have gotten to Minden in my life, which was from Iowa City, Iowa to Boulder, Colorado on I-80. And it was also in the winter, and it was also so cold. We stopped in Nebraska overnight, and the next morning our car wouldn't start because it was just so cold.
Yeah.
So we got a nice tour of one of your mechanic shops to try and get it up and running. We, as mentioned, we became acquainted via Extra Life this year. Bob and the Adventuring Guild was one of our very generous donors for Extra Life, and as part of those donations, we wanted to bring you on and have a discussion about you and your works with Dungeons and Dragons, but also, of course, to say a heartfelt thank you for participating in Extra Life. We mentioned that you also have a personal connection with the charity as well.
Yeah. My daughter actually has congenital scoliosis, and so we do go to the Children's Hospital in Omaha as one of the locations that we go for her. So it is very near and dear to my heart, and it's actually how I discovered Extra Life. Was they had a big poster of it up there in the hospital itself.
Yeah, where I've spent time in Seattle Children's Hospital. It's a fantastic organization. It's a great charity, and it is something that we're, I think, all proud to be a part of as members of Dungeons & Dragons team, members of the Dungeons & Dragons community. It has traditionally been centered around the Extra Life game day later in November, but we found that schedules are often in flux, and there's a lot we can be doing throughout the year. So we have gone ahead and created our D&D Extra Life page. It's at the same link you might have had last year. It's extra-life.org/team/DND. So for folks that are interested in participating again this year, we heartily encourage anyone and everyone to take part on the D&D team, or however else you would like to take part and help raise some funds for a fantastic organization. I am remiss. I have my personal page up, but I need to get some donations already set. for this year. And Bob, you were mentioning that you're going to be running at least one game as part of Extra Life?
Yeah, we're going to do our best to try and get two, but with schedules, I'm not able to do it on the actual game day, just kind of during the summer months. So we're going to try and at least hit one this year, if not two.
Well, best of luck, and we'll be tuning in and seeing how things go.
Yes.
But we also wanted to, from there, ask about your many endeavors, podcasting, the Adventuring Guild Podcasting Network. As a brief overview, what is the Adventuring Guild? Before we get into the various shows that you're putting out there.
Yeah, basically, we knew right from the start we wanted to have more than one podcast because, as I'm sure you guys know, there's just so many things you can do with D&D, and we didn't want to limit ourselves to just one show and then backtrack later on. So we started the Adventuring Guild as kind of an umbrella for what we were doing. We started off just with a local group here, kind of in the Minden area, about 30-mile radius, and we've grown now to 4 countries and 6 time zones, so it's a little bit difficult keeping it all together, but we do our best to make the podcast happen.
Yes, I was remarking that I have difficulty sometimes organizing the home campaign in the same city with folks here. So across multiple nations and across multiple time zones, and where some participation in daylight savings does or does not take place is always a random element. So
yeah, it definitely makes things difficult at times, but the guild members are great. We've got 16 Patreon members, and Patreon is how we run the guild basically. And all of our podcasts those members are the cast. So anybody that joins our Patreon gets into the shows. We guarantee Chaos Plan is one of them. We guarantee you a spot in Chaos Plan, which is a kind of an actual play campaign style game, and then you can submit character ideas for the Homebrew review, which is kind of our flagship, where we review all the Homebrew material because there's so much out there. And it's just so hard to tell what's good and what's not. You know, D&D Wiki has got a bit of a reputation for having those D12 plus D4 hit die, every level, and it's kind of crazy. So we try and separate those out a little bit.
So yes, just to mention it, the 3 podcasts currently running, the 3 shows, you mentioned the Homebrew Review. That's the actual play based around one-shots at levels 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20, in which homebrew classes and races are thrown against all that D&D has to offer to show how they play out. But there's also A Long Rest, which is your interview podcast, talking to guild members and other guests about D&D in general, some of the DM tools and tricks that aren't shown or reviewed in the actual play. And you mentioned the Chaos Plan. This is your new actual play campaign centered on a homebrew world named Arcadia, featuring guest DMs that help shape the world and story. And this, I am delighted by this. The group of ever-changing adventurers leaves everything up to chance in the randomly determined adventures. So I'm interested to dive into that. But beforehand, I was curious just sort of about the sort of the genesis of the Adventuring Guild, how maybe you got your start in the hobby, how the group came together, how what were the roots before it started to expand and grow vines here?
Yeah, I started D&D many years ago. 3.5 is kind of where I got started. I skipped most of 4th. There were just too many rules. I was never a huge fan of 4th. But I really dug into 3.5. And then in college, things got busy with part-time job, and I was a music major at that point. So 20 credit hours a semester was not unheard of. So I kind of took a break then, and right when 5th edition released, I believe it was right about the time that Tyranny of Dragons came out, the first book. I started at a local game shop DMing their encounters stuff because they didn't have a guy to do that, and that's kind of where I started. From there, the group just kind of grew, and it was those same members that I did encounters with and everything that kind of grew into the guild. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary for the podcast on January 1st. So we're over a year old now with it, and we're hoping to keep going from there.
And so it sounds like from your gaming experience, your personal gaming experience, a lot of time behind the screen as opposed to playing as a player?
Yeah, 99% of what I do is behind the screen, but I am actually on the Chaos Plan game. I'm allowing anything to happen, any combination of homebrew classes and races, as long as they aren't like level 1 demigods. But other than that, I'm allowing anything. So I'm actually taking a concept, because I'm a bit of an anime nerd too, and so I'm taking that stuck in a D&D world as my character. So I found this class called the Adventurer. I absolutely love it, and you build a class based upon feats, and all the class features are based into those feats, balanced for that. So I'm playing myself in the game, building a class as I go. So it's a lot of fun and a lot of work. Hopefully I'll be able to play a little bit more. We've got 4 major DMs within the guild itself, so I'm hoping to get those guys on soon.
And was there a point when you were playing, you were playing at the game store, when you decided, well, hey, I would like to start broadcasting the game? How did that decision get made, and what were the logistics in getting that set up and running?
Yeah, I was huge into making my own homebrew campaign, and so I started that off right off the bat once I started getting people that wanted to play more D&D than just the encounters on Wednesdays. And they were asking me, oh, well, what about this class? What about that class? Oh, this race looks really cool. And I basically got tired of repeating myself. I kept, I would tell people that, oh, yeah, this one is fantastic. This is a really balanced class. It's awesome. And then other ones like, no, not happening. No way. And so I decided then, there isn't a great way to figure out the homebrew for it. It's you can read articles online, but if you're reading the article, you might as well look through the class itself. So I'm like, this will show what the classes do, and we're like, let's spread it out there to anybody that wants to see it. And so that's kind of how the podcast got started, was because I got tired of explaining what homebrew was too unbalanced to use in the game.
All right, so we're going to have a larger discussion about this with everyone involved, and then everyone will know.
Exactly.
And I guess some of my questions revolve around, if you were going to offer some maybe advice or a bit of expertise for folks might be interested in getting their own podcasts up and running. Were there any technical or other logistical challenges along the way that you needed to overcome, or circumvent, or just general advice for folks interested in doing something similar?
Yeah, honestly, the biggest advice I ever got was from the Dungeon Masters Block podcast. Just go out there and do it. Network. Talk to people who've done it. I would be more than happy, anybody here at the Guild would be more than happy to talk about the stuff that we've done. And it really is just about building those network resources. I thought I needed all this super fancy special equipment to get it done, but I record most of my episodes now with literally just the laptop. The built-in speakers and mic are more than good enough. I use free software, Audacity, to do most of our podcasting. So that's all that it is just network out there, read online how other people are doing it, and make it fit for what you need. I
would echo some of those sentiments myself on the live streaming side. And all credit to Greg Tito on the D&D team. He had a very similar attitude, which is, you can measure and measure and measure all you want. It's never going to be perfect until you start cutting, and let's just start getting into the studio. It'll be rough around the edges because this is a new experience for us. This was, a couple of years ago, but we're never going to know until we get started. And lo and behold, here we are. And now once a week, I'm on a D&D live stream.
That's awesome. Yeah, listening to our first episodes, I cringe every time because I didn't know what I was doing at all. And unfortunately, I can't even go back and fix the audio because I didn't think to keep a backup of the raw audio. But, we're finally to a point where we're getting to that. We're finally kind of figuring out what we're doing, and we're hoping to live stream soon. Right now, it's just a logistical thing because of the 4 different countries and everything like that. Bit of a logistical issue, but as soon as we get that figured out, we're hoping to live stream as well.
And when it comes to software and other tools, correct me if I'm wrong, it looked like some of the games that the podcast you're involved in make use of tabletop audio, Obsidian Portal for campaign management in ways. Are there other, is that correct? Are there other tools that you use, or not just for the podcasting, but just for DM management itself?
Yeah, no, honestly, I use a ton. Google Drive and Google services have been like the biggest one. I throw everything that my players need to know into a folder. I share it all with them. We vote on the homebrew review when people submit ideas, and we have more than 4 ideas for a month episode. We vote on those using Google Forms. I use Dropbox a lot to save stuff. Evernote, obviously, for notes and stuff. Yeah, there's a ton of different things out there that you can use to make it work. Obsidian Portal's a big one. We actually have our own website that we're working to integrate a lot of Obsidian Portal's features into it, and I'm working really hard to build an interactive map where you can zoom in and see what is happening with the characters in different places on a timeline. Because as we add more people in, we're going to be jumping back and forth in that timeline.
So let's talk a bit about the homebrew review, because I'm very excited to find out what adventures you've been playing, some of your reactions and takeaway from them, and in particular some of the homebrew material that you might have been experimenting with. So again, homebrew review. This is the actual play podcast that you've been running. It's one shots, and I guess my first question is why the level sort of jumps 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20?
We did that because depending on what class you were in, 5th level, we want to do it 1 per tier. But 5th level, a lot of times you either got something big or your class got absolutely nothing at all. And that was a bit difficult for us to try and balance in. We did 4, 8, 12, and 16 because you get ability score increases then. So it made it, by 4th level, you not only had your archetype by most class standards, but you also have another feature to go along with it usually, or at least that ability score and the ability to take a feat to help round out your character wherever it was lacking. Most of the tanks always took tough. If we didn't have a healer, somebody always took magic initiate and jumped into cleric, just something like that to try and balance it out. So we did it at that level, and we actually, our first, I think, 4 or 5 segments were only up to level 16. We didn't do 20 originally because we used to all sit in that room for 12 to 14 hours and record it all in one go, and there was no way we were going to tack on 3 more hours to hit 20. But once we started spreading it out, we got enough people that said, hey, well, what about those level 20 mega abilities that completely changed the game? What about those? And so we added those in, and it has been great ever since.
And this is the game that you yourself are dungeon mastering.
Correct, yes.
So are there particular, not desires, but likes and dislikes maybe based on dungeon mastering at levels 4 versus level 20? Is there a sweet spot for you as a dungeon master as far as your players' abilities versus what you can throw at them? Or what are there levels that you like or dislike about these?
I played most of my games 4 and 8 with on top of, regularly. That's kind of the average. But my favorite levels are 8 and 12.
Okay.
4 is great, but the classes aren't 100% unique. There's a lot of things that you can cross back and forth with and kind of get the same effect depending on what you are. But once you hit 8 to 12, it is super, super unique, but not so overpowered that you have to throw a Tarrasque to bring them down. There's still a lot of enemies out there and a lot of versatility that you can use. I know spellcasting enemies change the game so much for players, and there are a huge variety that you can use at level 12 that are still relevant, that aren't the demi-lich and that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, so those 2 levels are my favorite, probably. 8 to 12 is kind of my sweet spot for the range.
I tend to concur myself. I tend to like playing just slightly higher than 1 to kick off a campaign because characters can be a little squishy, and you want them around to see all the things that you can threaten them with.
Yes.
And then at higher levels, which it is a good challenge, but it is sort of, as a dungeon master, how do you continue to be able to give a meaningful threat to the players where they're not going to be able to just pull what they need out of the hat?
Exactly. That wizard, once they get polymorph, it's all over for you.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. We had one.
That's come up.
Yeah, we had one homebrew review that's how they took out the final boss, was a polymorph, transformed it into a chicken, and then plane shifted it away. And I swore that was the last time I ever let a wizard polymorph my final boss.
This just came up on last week's show where somebody was polymorphing the main villain into a material component, a diamond, which was then consumed in a spell. So how does that work? And
yeah,
works well poetically. It's just one of those things you have to watch out for.
Exactly.
So for the homebrew material, I wanted to ask a little bit about maybe what you've experimented with and what you've maybe just found that's been to your liking. And when it comes to the homebrew material, are we largely talking about material for the players? Do you use material as, Dungeon Master homebrew material as well? How does it work?
Yeah, 90% is all the players.
Okay.
I push them really hard to try and pick a wide variety so we don't end up with all classes, all subclasses. I try and make sure that there's at least one homebrew race in the mix to kind of spread things out a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I do use some homebrew myself for the adventures, because a lot of the books, like we ran Curse of Strahd, all that campaign ends early enough that we still had 16 and 20 to take care of. Mm-hmm. And so we use mostly the DMS Guild. The DMS Guild, the Adepts, was absolutely essential to make a lot of this work, because those are as close to the book as you can get without being in the book for balance a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we use those a lot. And then I do occasionally use the different homebrew for supplements like crafting and those kind of things. And we use those a ton in the Chaos plan, actually. Almost all homebrew there. That way I have some sort of rule that I can point to, so it isn't just, oh, the DM likes this character more, their craft checks are easier. Like, no, I've got it right here. Here's the number. It's listed.
So when the players come with homebrew material, or I guess, how do players come with homebrew material? Is there sort of a meeting of the minds beforehand where different homebrew material is nominated or suggested, and as Dungeon Master you get final yay or nay? Or is it, in the spirit of the podcast, maybe, well, we're just going to experiment with this material, see what happens, and then take it from there?
Yeah, I do have final say a little bit. There was one episode where we used one of our wonderful Patreon members, Hope, played the Gambler, which she found on D&D Wiki, and she powered it down voluntarily, but on the very last episode, level 20, since we were already super broken at that point anyway, she decided to go all out with the ultimate feature, and it one-shot, I think all those creatures were CR 16 or above, and she one-shot 2 of them just right off the bat with a single move. So I do tone those down quite a bit, or I at least tell players, hey, no, please don't use this ability until 20, then you can show it off. But mostly, yeah, they come up with their own material, they do their own searches for it, and we actually have 2 authors, not big time, I guess, but 2 authors that do a lot on DMS Guild. We have got Braden Five Ash, B5 Homebrews, that does a lot there, and he's actually kind of my second in command here on the guild. And then we've got Lydia, who we just interviewed on the Long Rest episode, who created 2 classes that we have showcased one of them, and we're hoping to showcase the other one very soon as well.
I'm remiss to ask about the players really quickly. Before that, I just wanted to again reiterate that we're talking to Bob Nelson of the Adventuring Guild. We started the conversation way back last year, working through Extra Life, and finally had a chance to talk through his D&D endeavors today. We've got TK has joined the fray, is in chat right now. Working through the 2 raffles that we'll be running today for some of our maps and miscellany. We're probably going to be taking a quick break here in a couple of minutes to run through D&D Rewind, a recap of some of the weekly live streams. But before we do, I did want to ask, who are the players in Homebrew Review? I don't believe we've named them all. What are they currently playing, and what adventures are you currently running?
Yeah, we're doing something that we've been wanting to do for a long time. Usually we just pick a theme like Curse of Strahd or Tomb of Annihilation or something like that. But we first started a Final Fantasy theme where we used all Final Fantasy classes and races. And that turned out to be super, super popular, actually one of our most downloaded episodes. So now we're doing one that is all anime, which is absolutely ridiculous and so much fun. We're currently recording. The characters that are in that episode are Virgil, Hope, Michael Newman, who is Rhino, Twitch streamer, and who is the other one? Virgil, Hope, Rhino, and I'll think of the other one later.
Person to be named later.
Yes, to be named later. But yeah, we've got Naruto, Pokemon. We have got Sailor Moon. We've got Gurren Lagann. Oh, Michael Holmes is the other one. He's playing Kamina from Gurren Lagann. And it's absolutely ridiculous. So that's currently what's going on with the Homebrew Review. And Monday at midnight Central Standard Time is when we will be releasing the first of those episodes.
So no Record of the Lotus War? Is it already too close to D&D as far as anime goes?
It's actually, we're hoping to get a second one going. We had a fifth submission that was really, really good, and so hopefully we'll be doing actually a second segment of anime-themed craziness. And all the episodes I'm homebrewing to fit those worlds and really messed up crossover mismatch. So we're hoping it works out really well.
Well, I have borrowed liberally from Ninja Scroll for several villains in past D&D games, so it's definitely a fertile ground to be inspired by and find figures and characters from. All right, so we're going to be taking a quick break just to do a D&D rewind for a couple of minutes. Please stand by. Then we'll be coming back to talk a little bit more with Bob Nelson and the Adventuring Guild. We haven't even gotten to the other two shows, A Long Rest and Chaos Plan. So we will be talking about those coming up shortly. And this is where I look longingly at Pelham to see if we're ready to go. And we are.
And you see, suddenly Okira has tiny little dragon wings.
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all.
Like tiny? Like...
No, not tiny, not ridiculous. They're just, not... They're not gigantic, but they're...
Okay.
They're functional. They're size appropriate.
Proportional.
Leave it to Todd to give me like tiny little wings.
Teeny flappies.
That's all you got.
I get the feeling that you're not a fan of this Constantina character.
Okay.
What if I told you that in exchange for just letting me have a peek, just a peek at the book, I can help you with this problem, and then you'll be Mercy's favorite again.
No! You're not here! You can't hear this. Fine.
We're not only looking for balance whenever we make design decisions, but we are also concerned about the narrative cadence that the design creates. And we want there to be peaks and valleys. We want there to be times where that particular trick you just used, you're not going to be able to use it in this next scene. You're going to have to come up with something else.
Yes.
Because we don't want you to just have one button that you push over and over again. Again, not because that's going to break the game. No, it's actually something more serious than that. Because it might make the game boring.
And then I will take a very thick case file off of my shelf that just says Strix on it and put that in my bag, and some significantly smaller like single manila folders, and I will put those. One says Dorth and the other one says Paulton.
So like both guards kind of look at each other, and then like a one guard says, "Tell me more."
Well, so we work for a boss who has a boss. We are about third level from making main management. It's above, the regulars. You know what I mean? So this case is going to get us the big promotion to be a main manager for the Council of Waterdeep.
And you report to the council?
I do.
Good thing we don't. Get out of here.
But you were okay.
Yeah. So I mean, is murder a benefit?
It's a BA. Okay, so sorry, what's the ratio? It's 2 benefits to 1 flaw?
It's 2 benefits,
okay,
one
it says
flaw.
Written right there.
Yeah.
Great.
2 and 1.
Should have used my eyes.
And then if you choose to, you can take a 3rd benefit, but then it'll be 3 and 2 because you got to pick another flaw.
I'm a goblin. It's all dangerous territory to me.
Oh, right. Okay, we're in the iron mine. Thank you. Thank you, game that I called 4th floor. So we're on the 4th floor of this iron mine. And we are currently trying to find... Make sure we got this, yeah. Oh, right, we're trying to flood it because we're bad to the bone.
Do you have permission from your order to perhaps negotiate the price?
I have not. The price has been named. We are not haggling for rugs in the marketplace.
But we could.
Yes, you are free to haggle, of course. But in the marketplace, and only for rugs.
We're a little bit busy right now, but perhaps on the way back. We're a little bit busy right now, but perhaps on the way back.
No, the crawl one, not the vampire accent.
Shoot. We're a little bit busy right now.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. All right, got there.
Perhaps want to return.
In my version of this, you said that 3 times.
That happens in my version of this too.
Also, Rudy, you're getting attacked.
Oh no!
Oh yeah, by the way.
So this thing, trundles forward and is. You know, like the word trundles?
I do. It gives me like baby connotations, but okay.
Please describe how a plant trundles.
It waddles towards you.
All right, we are back. We're talking with Bob Nelson of the Adventuring Guild, the guild master for the podcast network in Minden, Nebraska, that focuses on 3 shows: Homebrew, Review, A Long Rest, and Chaos Plan. Chaos Plan we're going to be talking about momentarily. This is where there's a lot of random elements and other things that help shape the story. And the Homebrew Review, making use of a lot of homebrew material to help inform live play. I'm going to be asking chat for help right now. I've neglected to put this in. TK is running our raffles today, but I also wanted on the side to ask, and this was a homebrew question, kind of circles back. When I was driving through Nebraska way back when, I was going to Colorado to play D&D with my group at the time. We were coming from all over the country. I'll be going there again this weekend, although I'll be flying there this time, and running my old D&D group through the Extra Life adventure that we made here in the office this year for Lost Laboratory of Qualish. And as part of that, I wanted to ask if folks in the chat, if you have, one of the things I wanted to homebrew to try out was critical hits and critical failures. So if there are any effects that you would suggest that I add into a critical hit or a critical failure table for my D&D games coming up this weekend, I would love to hear your suggestions, and I will love to try them out and inflict them upon my players. Bob, speaking of the Homebrew Review, I did want to ask again, you're playing through some official campaign storylines. You mentioned that you're going to be moving into the anime storyline next, but your group had come off of playing Tomb of Annihilation recently, correct?
Correct, yes. We ended with the Maze of Shadows on the DMS Guild is how we ended it at level 20.
And any lessons from playing through Tomb of Annihilation, or memorable experiences, or advice for folks that might be playing it on their own, with or without homebrew material added into it?
Yeah, I definitely did not have the standard experience. We had a speedster, kind of based off the Flash, a Tabaxi speedster. We also had a Kakamoran clown, which was played by Braden, homebrewed the race and used the more clowns, I believe, for the homebrew. And so it was an absolutely ridiculous mess. They knocked Asarak into the lava. They tried to pick up several of the enemies in Maze of Shadows with Bigby's hand and drop them in lava. Lava was kind of the theme there for killing enemies. But it was a ton of fun. I definitely wish we had more time to do the map crawling aspect of it. I absolutely loved that. Probably my most fun moment was, and a lot of it didn't make it on air, simply because we had to cut it and there wasn't a whole lot of time, but I would have loved to explore more the spirits, how they interacted with the players, because those flaws are just hilarious to play out.
Yes, the 9 spirits tied to the alignments, I agree. Those are it was a novel mechanic. It was kind of a fun and interesting mechanic, and a fun way to kind of interact / mess with players, which is always a fun thing to do if it's done well and done in the spirit of fun gamesmanship. So
exactly, and so many of my players, they love the role play aspect. We just don't get to showcase a whole lot of it because we are kind of under that time constraint with a podcast. But it's so much fun to see that kind of stuff happen.
So that's a bit about the Homebrew Review. The Long Rest is the interview podcast where you're kind of debriefing players and guests and kind of talking through things. Is that accurate?
Yeah, a little bit. We kind of break it down into 3 different main kind of segment groups. We have got where we interview people about either one of their favorite characters that they had way back when. Some of our authors talk about their material that they have. We actually interviewed J.M. Perkins about his Salt and Wound setting. So there's that segment, and then I do one called the DM Showcase, where I just pick a random something that I use in the games that we just can't show in the Homebrew Review, like City and Wild, an amazing supplement for crafting and harvesting and all of that kind of stuff that just we don't have time to show. And then we also do the DM Toolkit, which we talk about some of the awesome stuff that you can use kind of behind the screen to compile your notes, and all of that kind of stuff. So those are kind of the 3 main segments that we do with the Long Rest.
So for an example, what were some of the maybe recent or memorable DM tips that had come up in conversation?
Yeah, we talked a lot with Lydia really recently. She's one of our Patreon members. You can see her on the Chaos Plan. But she talked a little bit about every DM should at some point try to make a homebrew class. Not just to, make a class that's usable, but to kind of see what the players, deal with, some of the different ways that you can do things. It is a lot of fun to try your hand at homebrewing. It really kind of expands your appreciation for what other creators have gone through to get that. Because it is a nonstop, very difficult process to balance and have it be in line with everything, because something as simple as adding on 1 spell slot a couple levels early can really change the game. Getting a high-level heal off really early, any kind of healing, especially if you go non-magical, can really affect the game big time.
Last week I tried to convince Jeremy Crawford to work on the Homebrew Bartificer class, but he was not having any of that. I did want to make a quick mention. I know folks are very interested and eager for the actual Artificer. Just as a quick housekeeping reminder, I think the schedule that we're going to be moving towards is Unearthed Arcana will be hitting at some point a month. We had been sort of, no pun intended, artificially tying it to the 2nd Monday of the month to have a date. But I think moving forward, we just want to put it out when it's ready. And the Artificer is a great case study for that. So do look for the Unearthed Arcanas to hit during the month. We just might need to be a little bit loose about the dates. When it comes to the Artificer, I believe Jeremy had mentioned this in the last live stream as well, but look for it later this month. But wait, you say, it's February 27th. So without giving a date, look for it later this month, which is probably going to be within the next 24 hours. But we'll definitely put that link up when we have that available. So that is on the Artificer. So let's talk about a little about the Chaos Plan as well. This is the newest actual play campaign that you have up and running. So we mentioned it's a homebrew world, but what else can you tell us about Chaos Plan?
Yeah, the Chaos Plan is an absolutely ridiculously random adventure. The entire thing is determined by rolls, by decks of cards. There's even a magic 8-ball that's involved. It's just completely randomly determined, and one of the most meta experiences you're probably going to see in a game that isn't just with all your buddies, sitting around a table. We're jumping. Basically, the premise is there's 3 main continents. The one that we're focusing most on is the Elemental Islands, kind of a big island archipelago. And each one has a weird elemental factor about it. And then there's kind of a middle island and a big city in it, kind of the main capital city called Port City. And there's different guilds there. And one of the major guilds has a portal type shard, a portal network. Think every MMO out there, with different dungeon queues and all of that other kind of stuff. And so basically you can go anywhere. We've found some amazing homebrew. Some guy is converting the World of Warcraft dungeons into D&D adventures, and we're using some of those. We're using out-of-the-book stuff. We're using DMS Guild adventures. Anything that I read through that looks halfway balanced, we have the possibility to go through. It all depends on the dice used, the magic 8-ball, whatever, to determine where we go that day.
So I'm eminently fascinated by this concept of the completely random determination in the game. So when you say things are randomly determined, what does that mean? The group will wake up at the beginning of the day and there's a die roll to decide what they're going to do, where they're going to go, or how far do you carry the randomness to it?
About a week out, I have all of my players give rolls, depending on how many different adventures I've got. And I've got a Google Drive folder with like 70, 80 gigs worth of random adventures and everything like that. And I literally have them roll and I start counting down the list. I start at a random spot and I count down that list, and they roll an 8, so I count down 8 and we go from there, and then the next roll. So about a week out, I start looking at what I'm going to need to prep, and then the day of the adventure, about an hour beforehand, we kind of decide what we're going to do between 2 or 3, and then depending on their choices, determines which of those 3. So it's a ton of prep, but I pride myself on running almost all just kind of off the bat. I don't really plan a whole lot and try and just run with it.
So this is a huge list of sort of adventure hooks and scenarios, and you randomly determine which one they might be pursuing?
Correct. The portal is, you can go anywhere. Any adventure, randomly homebrew determined. If they're staying within the world, I use different story hooks. In fact, the actual very first group game, they stayed within the world. And we ran an adventure from Magic Villages for Sale, or Magic Village for Sale. I'd have to look up the author to be sure, but you can find it on the DMS Guild. And they went to Silverleaf, and everybody was shrunk down, super small, and a whole adventure developed from there. So, yeah, there is story hooks within the world itself that I come up with, but if they jump through that portal, it is 100% determined by the dice and their choices.
And how far does this convey through the player's actions as well? Are they also making random determinations for what they do and where they're going to go, or do they tend to stay in character, and once they have the hook, do they play it through?
That's actually the best part, is everybody stays in character most of the time. I'm at least 75% of the time. But the big catch there is a lot of the characters have a lot of meta knowledge. Yeah. We have one individual, Michael Holmes again, that is playing a character, Kleinenstern is his name. And he is a Lotus, which from the Destiny games, basically, he was once a star that is now inhabited in a body, and he came from the future. And so he has all this this meta knowledge that he throws out there, and so they'll make Lord of the Rings jokes, and we have a half elf, Lydia, there, who jokes around with the characters because we've got an elf and a dwarf there, and we've got Barnaby Hardcastle the Third, played by Stygius, one of our guild members as well, and he's kind of playing Indiana Gnome, for lack of a better term. He's using the Seeker class, has the fedora and everything, and they make so many meta jokes, and it's so hard for them to stay in character because you just want to laugh at it. You really do just want to roar, but we have to try and cut it out just a little bit to keep it halfway on track.
As with many a D&D campaign, there's always that meta level of humor that just seems you wouldn't want to get rid of it. You know, you want to make sure that the game progresses at a reasonable pace, but at the same time, your players know things your characters don't. It gets discussed around the table in joyful ways most of the time. So having that codified into the rules and the actual DNA of the campaign sounds kind of intriguing. You mentioned not just random die rolls, but you're using cards, you're using magic 8 balls. How do those come into play? This week we're going to make this determination with some random device.
Yeah, a lot of times, like the Taroka deck within Curse of Strahd has a whole system there of where items are placed and, you know, who your allies and enemies are. And so I've used that to determine kind of what your ally is going to be. I have used the deck of cards, assigning each one a numerical value, and we draw from the cards to see what happens. If it's a face card, a super special thing happens, and if it's an ace, it's basically a nat 20. If I draw one of the jokers, it's a nat 1, and something terrible will happen. So yeah, just randomly determine what I'm going to use depending on how many choices. If I've got less than 100 but more than 20, I usually go with a deck of cards because there's 52. You know, that kind of a thing.
Yes, and again, quick reminder, if folks in the chat do have suggestions for homebrew critical hit or critical fail results that I personally can use, I would appreciate it because I'm prepping for my own game and do want to mess with my players in random, delightful ways, which is always fun to do. So when did the Chaos plan get up and running? How did you make the decision this is a campaign style that you wanted to run, and then how did you get it going?
It's a 3-part process. My very first homebrew world was based almost entirely off of one of my favorite games growing up as a kid, Arcanum of Steamworks and Magic Obscura. Absolutely amazing game. The company unfortunately no longer is in business, but it's a fantastic game. And so it started with that continent. And I homebrewed through it, and I'm like, you know what, this is fun, but my players can tell where I'm going with it. You know, it's a little bit too obvious. Those that have played the game know the line. And so I started throwing random rolls in there. And then it just kind of translated into all my homebrew games. I made a lot more random. I started to improvise on the spot and that kind of thing with a lot of my campaigns. The Elemental Islands really took structure with a couple years ago. I was playing with a new group of high schoolers. Never played a whole lot of D&D, just starting to learn how to do it. And I really like the nautical theme. I like the idea of having zones that are completely isolated from one another and whole new themes. You can go as wild and wacky as you want without it affecting another island. So that's kind of how the Elemental Islands got started, was I wanted to be able to throw them into any situation, any environment, and have it not be, oh, well, why is the fire capital only 30 miles away from the ice capital? That doesn't make sense. Like, no, they're two different islands. That's how it works. So that's kind of how that got started. And the random rolls were just funny. And so we decided, there isn't really anything this random out there for podcasts. So let's just see what we can do and improvise.
Well, as mentioned, if you like nautical themes, you're going to love our recently announced source book coming out in May. We did make that announcement yesterday, and we hadn't talked about that beforehand. We had just posted that up yesterday. It was Monday. It was Monday that we announced Ghosts of Saltmarsh. So this will be taking some of the nautical-themed adventures of Dungeon Magazine past, as well as the U series, as well as new mechanics for ships and things along those lines. So I'll make sure once it comes out in May, I'll make sure to send the Adventuring Guild a copy. And see what you think of it, and see if there's any things you can pull out and incorporate into the Chaos plan. So
for sure, yeah. Thank you. We're eternally grateful. I love being able to throw just random everything at players. I don't want to limit anybody in what they can do. So I am super excited for this. Having seen some of the material, kind of when all the rumors were floating around what it would be, looking through all the old adventures trying to pick it out. So I'm super excited to see what happens.
I think the clues kind of led back to Spoilers and Swag. In December, Nathan and Kate might have shown off some of the concept art for the cover, and mentioned that a nautical themed book might be coming out. So I think, as always here, it's kind of nice to have it public knowledge, because then we don't have to keep things under wraps, and invariably try not to reveal before we're meant to. But that was our Spoilers and Swag. Speaking of which, normally we do Spoilers and Swag the first Friday of every month, but due to scheduling considerations, we're going to be streaming our next Spoilers and Swag on the second Friday of March. That will be March 8th, and it will be at a slightly different time. A little later in the afternoon, it'll be coming on at 4 p.m. Pacific. For scheduling reasons, and I think also maybe to give a little prime time love to some of our East Coast viewers as well. So look for next Spoilers and Swag will be hitting March 8th at 4 p.m. Pacific. Pelham will be out of the office, so I've been furiously performing the role of his technical understudy. So if folks be kind, as there are technical mishaps aplenty. Talk about random. Next Spoilers and Swag stream will be me frantically working the controls, but we look forward to it then.
New hashtag blame Bart.
Yeah, well, no, I love the blame Tito is fine, because we can always just have that ready to go, and then it never moves off of blame Tito. But we do, yes, new hashtag. But speaking of Ghosts of Saltmarsh, I think we have loaded up one of our new emotes as well. Oh, there, we just fired it off for folks in the chat. We've got our ship emote. There it is. I did want to give a quick shout out to one of our fantastic designers, Emi Tanji. Creates things for the Twitch channel, such as our emotes. She created the Valentine's Day cards that we put up on the website a couple of weeks ago. So thanks to Emi's work for giving us some emotes. It looks like we do also have our 2 raffle winners selected, so congratulations. We'll be sure to get out our copies of Maps and Miscellany as the weeks progress. Again, we're getting close to the top of the hour, but I did want to mention thanks again to everyone for watching in advance. Thanks to our moderators, I should say, but thanks to TK in particular for running our raffle this time. You can watch TK and all the other players on the live stream before this, as Roll20 presents Jace Beleren Must Die. And Lauren Urban will be coming up later this afternoon at 2 p.m. For Heroes of the Veil, so do stay tuned for that. But before we go, Bob, I wanted to make sure that we've been talking about the Adventuring Guild. We've been talking about the 3 podcasts, Homebrew, Review, A Long Rest, and Chaos Plan. But for folks who might not be listeners or familiar, how can they take part? How can they join the Adventuring Guild?
Yeah, we've got our website, www.theadventuringguild.com. That'll give you all the information you need about kind of what each podcast is, and our home rules and downloads and all that for the Chaos Plan. And our podcast is made up entirely of our Patreon members. So everybody that's a part is a Patreon supporter. So if you support us on Patreon, you can join. For just $1, you get a guaranteed spot on the Chaos plan and at least one group game. And the more people we get, the more games we can run, because we have more DMs than just myself, luckily, help split up the work a little bit. And for $2 a month, you can join the Homebrew reviews, submit characters for review, that kind of thing. We also have sponsorship opportunities for authors and everything else. So, yeah, visit the website, visit Patreon. We're also on Facebook. That's where we do most of our communication. We do have a Twitter. I try to keep it updated, but I'm not the best at keeping that up to date with everything. But, yeah, so just look for us on one of those platforms, and you can find us there.
So there you go, and definitely, again, I wanted to mention I appreciate you coming on to the Dragon Plus live stream, but in particular as well, of course, taking part not only in the D&D community, but via Extra Life as well. So again, a very heartfelt thanks for all of your work in those regards.
And thank you everybody that has taken part as well for your listeners, because it is a personal thing for me. So I'm so glad that the community is as supportive as it is.
And I'll mention that again. I mentioned this at the top of the show, but we do have the Extra Life D&D team page up and running already for this year. We're going to be taking part and looking to participate more fully throughout the year, and not just as we get closer to, or especially as we get closer to the Extra Life game day, but throughout the year as well. So go to the Extra Life site. You can find /team/D&D, and we are there. Really quickly, since this is the Dragon Plus live stream, I did also want to mention that the latest issue of Dragon Plus is now available. Issue 24, free as always on iOS, Android, and at dragonmag.com. No surprise, we did want to take a quick peek into Ghosts of Saltmarsh. We have an interview up there with the cover artist. I'm going to butcher the name, but it's Grzegorz Rutkowski, I believe. He is the cover artist for the Ghosts of Saltmarsh cover. We also talk with Darkened Wish, IDW comic series with B. Dave Walters and Tess Fowler, and the Adobe Terror of Undermountain contest winner Will Kalkanis Ellis, all interviewed in the issue. We also look at adding some more resources to your game. We included a few more maps. Richard Witters, here on the D&D team, created a foibles and quirks table for players. This is also a potential random table to make use of in games. And a free adventure. We've been talking about the DM's Guild, but there is a free adventure from the DM's Guild Struggle in Three-Horn Valley as part of this issue as well. We try and find ways that we can incorporate some game material for you in each issue, along with everything else that we do. So do look for that again, issue 24. It's on iOS, Android, and at dragonmag.com. We hope you enjoy. If there are any comments or feedback, questions, concerns, do take the reader survey. We look through those every issue. And you have my Twitter handle right here on the screen, so you can always reach me then. So before we switch over to Heroes of the Veil, again, congratulations to our sweepstakes winners. Thanks to everyone spending an hour of your afternoon with us. Thanks to our followers, subscribers, as always to our moderators. And again, thanks to Bob Nelson of the Adventuring Guild for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, thanks everyone. We're going to be stepping aside. Do look for us next week. Jeremy Crawford will be back, I believe. If he is not off at GaryCon, I think he will be joining us. So in any case, we will be back next week, Wednesday, 1 p.m., and we'll take it over to Heroes of the Veil. Thanks, everyone.